Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking your time on Friday to learn something about mental health and wellness. Welcome to Mental Health and Wellness Day 2023, organized by Data Platform Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group and Data Platform Women in Technology Group. Thank you so much for all of our sponsors, especially Redgate and SQL Gene Training. Without your support, this event would not have been possible. And our one of the organizers, Tracy Bogiano, actually she do the work for foster family aliens. Um, uh, so what is it about? You can see there what we do. Foster family aliens is like it's a family-led non-profit organization supporting children and youth served through the foster care system and the dedicated families and professionals that care for them. And we would like to thank you, Redgate, uh, for uh, for donating for this wonderful cause. And you can contact foster family aliens, and the contact details are here. And before beginning our session with Kristina Mishra, please take a moment to read the disclaimer here. This event is all about like sharing the personal stories from our speakers. This is not a medical advice. If you have any emergency medical issues, please contact medical professionals. And you can see like our code of conduct in our link described here. All right, welcome, Kristina Mishra. We are so glad to have you here. I would like to, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Hello, and welcome to my session on how not to do all the things, my challenges with neurodiversity. This is the agenda. It's pretty informal, and fair warning, it's going to be a bit random throughout this session, but it makes sense to me. And since this session is about neurodiversity, I figured that maybe it would make some sense to some of you. With this session, I wanted my process to be a little bit different than I normally do with speaking. Sessions in the spirit of how not to do all the things. Normally, for me, creating a session takes me forever. By doing things a little different with this session, maybe I'll find a better way in my process for building sessions that allows me to develop them faster and better, which is kind of the heart of what this session is about. Or maybe it will completely suck, and I'm totally okay with that, because allowing yourself to fail is sometimes the greatest thing you can do. And as odd as it sounds, it's certainly something I want to model for my kids and for anyone that may watch my sessions, so people know that it's okay. So what is this session going to talk about? It's going to talk about a little girl that never quite felt that she fit in and always knew there was something different about her. It's going to talk about struggles, triumphs, and finding my tribe. It's going to talk about a small personal bomb drop that prior today only a handful of people were aware of. We'll go into burnout that can be dangerously close to a total breakdown. And then closing with a what if and mastering the art of managing neurodiversity chaos to give yourself more space. And then the what if of a cocaine-fed mutant fruit fly. So hopefully I've captured your attention enough to hold on through odd randomness we may encounter and any boring parts like my next slide. Let me know if it did, because then I can pat myself on the back about reading those 3 pages in that TED Talk book when I probably should have been doing something else. Obligatory introductions. My name is Kristina Mishra. A quick background about me. I've been a data professional for over 20 years. Titles I've held are DBA, consultant, developer, BI engineer, manager, mentor, and many, many more. My current title is data architect. Some of my favorite projects have been working on global health projects, both around the world and domestically. I'm a strong believer that we can make a huge impact around the world with healthcare data. I also believe that working in other industries brings you more knowledge to solve the problems such as the one we see in healthcare today. Currently, I work for a wonderful company, Kent Corporation, which I work for the headquarters that hosts the shared IT services. Oops, let me go back here. For all of the BI and data analytics. as well as I'm a member of our Cloud Center of Excellence team. Some history of me in the community. I was a volunteer organizer for SQL Saturday in Atlanta for over 8 years, and for the induction year for SQL Saturday BI. I hold cloud certifications with both Microsoft and AWS. I have a bachelor's in information systems from Kennesaw State University and a master's in business analytics from Iowa State University. I'm neurodiverse, so I normally don't answer questions in the middle of my presentations. I have high anxiety about it and completely throwing me off. And to be honest, I have trouble processing things said to me at times. That said, I'm doing a little bit of a different format and talk here. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me during the presentation, at the end, or afterwards through the Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. that you see up here. Throughout this presentation, you will hear me refer to ADHD, but there is a really high likelihood that I have other neurodiverse conditions. I just don't specifically refer to them usually, as ADHD is the only thing I've ever bothered to get formally diagnosed. Still, lots of the items I'll discuss today have crossovers, so hopefully things will resonate with multiple folk here, but possibly not if you are not neurodivergent. Many years ago, I tried to describe my ADHD like a wall of TVs with every single one on at a high volume. I had to figure out which ones had the information I needed and how to get it, and that they were on all the time and the shows were constantly changing. That's not really what ADHD is about, but I still think it gives pretty good insight into the hyperactivity in my brain. The first time I explained it to my mom this way, I saw facial changes that I had never seen, where I felt she may be able to get it now at some level. Having all those TVs on like that isn't horrible, and it can give us a lot of information about a lot of things, which also helps us build a wide range internal catalog that can be used, but it can obviously be overwhelming frequently. For clarification, I'm not an externally a hyper person. I'm inattentive ADHD. I use this analogy because I think many ADHD inattentive types deal with an internal hyperness that I feel this analogy applies towards. This is going to be really weird for me while I talk about myself because it makes me very uncomfortable. And I feel like I'm doing it too long here, and I begin to wonder if it adds value. But then I remember seeing sessions from other people I admire and them speaking to their background and how much it helped me. When I started creating this presentation, I remembered having this picture. Somewhere on the back of my head, I knew it was in my house. And I really wanted to include this picture because to me, it captured a moment in time that I felt was a really noticeable ADHD moment. It was picture day at camp. And of course, I forgot. I was off playing in the woods or with the camp rabbit or something like that. People had to come find me. I wasn't wearing the requested light colored top with shorts, and someone had to find a brush to drag through my rat's nest hair really quick. People were frustrated at me, including many of my cabin mates. I slid into the front side part at the last minute. The idea of this picture made me go down memory lane and analyze all my neurodiversity quirks back then. And it quickly, in my head, embodied so much meaning to me that I had to find this picture for this presentation. It probably took me about 4 hours over a couple of days, looking through computers and physical photos in my basement that are still not put away. And when I finally plopped it into the presentation, I wasn't even sure if it made any sense. But that is ADHD. From running around North Carolina mountains, forgetting about others, to needing to find the picture that recaptured it, and then forgetting why it was important to the story to begin with. That said, we will start back at the beginning with my mom. Like all good mothers, mine will tell you, actually gush on how good I was when I was little, which is not what you typically hear of a neurodiverse kid. If you ask, she will be more than happy to tell you how while my older brother had her running around in circles, that I was so good that I would just sit and play by myself for hours and hours, even as a toddler, never making much of a peep. And you know what? That is true. I liked to be by myself and play quietly in my own little world, as people often said. And I did all the things in my own little world. It wasn't that I didn't like people, though they did overwhelm me at times, but I just preferred things or animals. Later, I realized it was because I didn't understand all the rules that seem to constantly change when you are with people, and I still sometimes don't. My father died when I was 3, so I was a bit of an outcast with being raised by a single mom. As I got older, I never felt like I belonged. Not at school, not at camp, not at after-school activities. I was different, and I often thought there was something dreadfully wrong with me. I didn't like looking people in the eyes, and later in life, I was told that it meant I was probably trying to hide something I wasn't. Teachers loved me. Usually kids didn't. In 2nd grade, I tried to do a reset and pretend I was my own twin, which I don't have a twin. And I told everyone my mom put us in different schools and we were switching for the day. It didn't work. Weird and common health issues seemed to follow me around. I had sensory issues and often had to make things even on both sides of my body. If my left leg bumped into something, I had to bump my right leg in the same spot obsessively. For a brief period, I convinced myself that I was an alien and had a weird mark on my pinky to prove it. I still do. And that my alien parents were going to come back to get me any day now, as long as the sharks in the pool didn't eat me first. In 5th grade, a kind guidance counselor asked my mother if they could test me for the gifted program after I had a rare breakdown with a teacher. She agreed, and apparently I passed. I was sure somebody had made a mistake. At the end of 5th grade, I was tested to see if my IQ was high enough for a program designed to teach middle schoolers college math, even though my grades were all over the place. It was a rare feat for me to remember homework tasks and even harder to start them. Again, I fooled them all and scored high enough, and I secretly wondered if my tests got switched with somebody else. Once in middle school, I began to hate school. Not so much for the school stuff, though I did struggle there, but because I had problems making friends. Girls knew things about makeup and hair and clothes, and I didn't. So, like a good future data professional, I collected data and analyzed it. I had a notebook for a while where I wrote down everything. I wrote down what the girls wore, phrases they said, ways they wore their hair, and things they liked, though it was impossible for me to remember simple things that everybody else seemed to know, like what band sang a particular song. After analyzing the data, I tried to mimic them. I taught myself social cues, but trying to mimic often felt very unnatural, and I was sure that people were going to make fun of me. I ditched the notebook for fear it would be discovered. People would rarely talk to me at lunch, so I started hiding in the library at lunchtime instead, because I didn't know why I was so different, but I was painfully aware that I was. To this day, I often feel this way with people unless I'm actively engaged in a conversation, and sometimes even then. I dropped out of the math program after 6th grade and went back to my old school. That didn't really help. I could never sustain high grades in all my classes at once, and my mom couldn't figure out why my grades would flip in my classes from quarter to quarter. One year, my grades were so bad that everyone was sure I was going to have to repeat the grade, but then I managed to get all A's in the last quarter. So I passed. How could I get all A's my last grading period when in theory, everything was a building block? What I didn't know then was that my schoolwork issues were due to an inability to focus, combined with multiple processing issues, from sensory to audible, particularly if I was stressed. After a certain point, I learned that my schoolwork, I learned most of my schoolwork from like books or doing activities myself, because I never knew what the teacher was saying. That Charlie Brown teacher voice, wah, 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 was exactly how my lessons processed to me when she spoke or when any of my teachers spoke. I didn't have any actual hearing issues, and I never even heard of ADHD until I was in my 20s. As I grew older and hit puberty, things became even more challenging. ADHD is extremely hard for undiagnosed kids, and my lack of impulse control had me hitting almost every single statistic you see for risks for ADHD kids. My future prospects were pretty dim, according to everyone except my mom. Somehow my mom knew I would be all right. I actually dropped out of high school, but then was able to start college at 17 before my class graduated. And then shortly afterwards, I dropped out of college. It wasn't until I was 19 that I had my son. And 6 months later, at the ripe old age of 20, left my husband, and I was able to start to get back on track. Well, at least start to. I still struggled a lot with regular life tasks. So this is a random insert because I really like this Venn diagram and I couldn't find a place to use it. I was thinking that both that the audience and myself may need a little break by now, particularly me, for sharing that information. And actually a pat on the back to me, because if I really followed what my brain wanted to do, I would have added 4 to 8 more circles to this Venn diagram and would have spent 5 hours filling them out precisely right. But fortunately I didn't. This is ADHD. I really wanted to fix those cropped edges, and maybe I will eventually if it doesn't fall into my forget boxes, but I know I'm terrible at estimating time, and I needed to actually put the time in higher value areas like finishing this presentation. So I didn't fix all the things. That's a major accomplishment for me, by the way. 10 points for Team Christy. So if reading a paragraph in a book is sometimes difficult, but you have to read every single one of these sentences and then analyze them in the context of a Venn diagram, I'm going to suggest to you that you may want to go get tested for ADHD, especially if after reading some of these sentences, you immediately follow up with Googling some of them. Apparently, I am the last person to know that in certain studies, milk weakens bones. So fast forward a little bit, and after different therapists for a variety of reasons, I was finally diagnosed with ADHD. I'm also relieved to hear that some of the other worries I had about myself were not an actual problem, but were more a result from me self-medicating, according to a doctor, sometimes poorly. Fortunately, I was very much into computer things as a kid, and this returned to me in adulthood. I got a job doing all things computer related for an art gallery that had an online sales presence. And after a year, I moved into a full-blown tech support position at a software company. Yay, me, adulting. The company's application worked with Microsoft Access, which I was familiar with, and SQL Server, which I wasn't. But I quickly became familiar with both the backend code and pointed out how people could circumvent the security to access it in SQL Server. After just under 2 years, I was asked to another company by people who knew my work, where my salary almost doubled. Every 2 or so years, I moved and got to learn all new things. As a single mom with a full-time job, I'd take college classes when I could. It took me about 10 years to graduate from my bachelor's. College, incidentally, was also way easier for me than high school. Focusing deeply on 3 classes at a time for a shorter period versus dragging out 7 classes was exactly what I needed. We need more K-12 schools that recognize this for neurodiverse folk. Every 2 years, I moved to a different company. Somewhere along the line, I had read that it was the best thing to do in IT industry to make salary jumps. It paid off. It also gave me a very wide range of skills because good database people were in short supply. And since I could prove I had some skills and accolades there, and that I was also a workaholic, companies would let me learn as I went along. By doing this, I got experience in a wide variety of industries, all with SQL Server skills and all things data related. For the most part, I trained myself through books, online programs, and just experimenting. My college degree at that time, they had very little offerings for database classes, and the ones they did, I already knew that information. Microsoft made it possible for me to learn with developer type downloads, which I will forever be thankful for. So I could break and fix things through all hours of the night when my hyper-focus was best. Working with different companies gave me a wide variety of skills across industries, which allowed me to pull more strings together to connect dots. ADHD people are great at finding patterns that others can't and out-of-the-box solutions. Each new job allowed me the opportunity to play with a new puzzle. For a person with ADHD, having to learn new skills all the time is great. We get bored easily. Tech is always changing, and there's always something new for those that want it. Admittedly, it does make it a bit more challenging for me to do more speaking sessions because I always want to do something completely different, and I haven't quite learned the art of reusing sessions. If you haven't figured it out already, IT is a great place for neurodiverse people. That's why there's so many of us here. We just need a little bit of help along the way. Why do I bring all of this up? Sharing personal stories, particularly ones that are not very flattering, makes most of us pretty vulnerable and self-conscious. ADHD people already feel that way a lot of the time, so that makes it extremely difficult unless we are blabbering or trying to relate something from your story to our own life. But it's important. One, it's important to be vulnerable and show how we overcome, because most neurodiverse people have felt at one time or another, sometimes several times a day, that self-doubt and hopelessness. Seeing others that have been there who understand and can say, yeah, but you'll be all right, is essential. My mother never really understood my struggles and had plenty of her own, just different, but she was always there to support me 100% and let me know I was awesome. So this is me telling you, you are awesome. Making it through all your struggles is proof. So now with all that out of the way, let's do a quick talk about experiences, challenges, and awesomeness. So experiences, my brain runs wild all the time. It's hyper on the inside. I'm always thinking of different things, new inventions, new possibilities. I went from being a dropout in high school to holding a master's in analytics with a six-figure salary. Although, to be fair, I had that salary way before the master's. I have run major projects that have made impact in public health, both domestically and globally. And I've also burnt myself out more than once with trying to do too much. So challenges, I'm uninterested in anything average. I saw that on a shirt the other day, along with some other great shirts I'll mention. I have to have a toolbox to be my best self, and that toolbox changes. I have to identify when I may need to kind of make those changes in my toolbox. I need to learn to use my impulsivity to my benefit instead of to my detriment. Ditto for needing to do things that stimulate my brain. Perfectionism is a constant problem for me, even in small things that don't make sense to others. I have to guard against burnout because I simply want to do too many things. ADHD people want to do all the things all the time. Benefits. This is the other shirt that I saw the other day. I really, really liked. Wherever I am adding value. Sometimes people don't even know it. So I saw that t-shirt. It's from Mahogany Mamas, and I'm going to buy it later today, but I was going down a rabbit hole when I went to look at the site because every t-shirt has sentences like that are just fantastic. So we are great in emergencies. We're incredibly creative and have a wide range of knowledge because all the different things we wanted to know right then, all those hyperlinks. I had a friend used to tell me, you just constantly, you are the hyperlink. You're like the internet. You just next. So by doing all those hyperlinks in our brain constantly, we actually get a wide range of knowledge. With our ideas, each one holds the promise of something amazing that we just have to follow up on right this second, or it'll be gone. If it interests us, we can have laser hyper focus where time loses all meaning until we get the thing done. These are fantastic attributes for someone in IT and entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs actually have a really, really high, like IT rate of ADHD people in them. And inventors and high chaos professionals like emergency medical people and firefighters. And we can actually even switch between things.
Kristina?
Hello?
Can you hear me? We are stuck on the slide, experiences, challenges, and benefits title slide.
Because I'm still going over the benefits.
Oh, no, we are still seeing the title slide. Experiences, challenges, and benefits, the round figure with.
You're supposed to.
It is supposed to be there? Okay. I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
I'm just going over the benefits part now.
Okay.
So we could actually pull all of those things together and reinvent ourselves. So as stated by Kimberly Quinn, who's a professor, a speaker, a success coach, and a podcaster, we ADHD people, we bring creativity and innovation to the world, and our minds are lightning fast and wired to wander. Discovery of not doing it all. This is one of my favorite all-time memes, but since it's rarely credited and since that has always, for some reason, bothered me and stuck in my head whenever I see it, I will credit it here and in my next slide. This was a meme made off of Ali Broch's blog, Hyperbole and a Half, and it is hilarious, especially if you're neurodiverse, but it's sometimes sad, telling of her neurodiverse childhood. It's mostly old content now, and I have both of her books, but it's a really great blog if you're interested in those things. But this is a perfect meme for this session, do all the things. We want to do all the things. Some days, sometimes several times in a day, at the end of the day, it feels like nothing got done. And the things start to accumulate and we feel overwhelmed. Several years ago, I was in a job I loved, but was in the constant mode of doing it all. I was the only senior SQL staff for a consulting company. And not only was I spread thin across my projects, but I also had to help everyone else, sometimes at the drop of a hat. About the time I cracked my second tooth from a stress-related constant clenching of my teeth that I was unaware of, I realized other health problems I've been having, and that ultimately that I was burnt out. This is the ringing bell I thought of when I wanted to make this session, because it seems like we always have an overloaded schedule, particularly ADHD people, because we take on too much. So taking a step back, why do ADHD people want to do so much, right? One, ADHD people often have a problem saying no. This comes from both being impulsive, yes, I want to do that thing, and conflict avoidant. Okay, I'll do it. We often have very little concept of time and how long something will take, and we think it will be easy to squeeze anything in. Two, ADHD people get bored easily, particularly towards the end of a project. We want to move on to the shiny new thing, even when we have 10 projects we need to wrap up. We see them as done once they get close enough and are looking for the next thing. 3, ADHD people have a high need for stimulation. New things and ideas get us excited and give us the stimulation our brains need. And lastly, we have a hard time focusing on one thing at a time. So often we like to have multiple things to flip through. Plus, the focus issues make staying on tasks and completing tasks difficult. I'm going to go out on a limb that being a high performer also acts as a type of stimulation, but my need for high performance often clashes with my need for things to be just so. It is not perfect, then it's crap to me, which adds a lot of unnecessary time. I'll talk about those things in a minute, but if you only take one thing away from this session, then I hope it's to realize it's okay not to do it all. Not only is it okay, it's actually pretty essential. Because when we operate at 1,000 for too long, things start to break down. That's what happened to me. And the last time it happened, it took years for me to get back in the game. Not weeks, not months, but years. It took me 6 months just to not wake up in the middle of the night, freaking out, wonder what important thing did I not do, even though there wasn't. And I'm certainly not the only one. I hear this from all different people. I heard it just the other day in a woman group. And since neurodiverse people are particularly susceptible to becoming overwhelmed, it's ironic how we keep piling more things on. In my case, discovering not to do it all meant about 8 months of stepping back and deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had to force myself to relax, and that was really hard for me. I took up yoga by myself, of course. I exercised. I slept, which is not something I do a lot, even though I want to sleep. And I even did routine meditation, something which traditionally I've always avoided because when I first tried it when I was younger, everything was just going too fast in my head and I couldn't slow it down. And so I had to learn how to do it different ways to avoid that. I read books and watched learning videos at my own leisure. I took long walks and let my mind run in 50 directions it loves to go. And finally, I was able to breathe again and make a plan where I didn't feel this horrible feeling of dread and constant stress anymore. My plan turned out to be grad school. And then in the middle of it, it also had to include staying at home with my kids during COVID. And even though it cost me a small fortune to not work for a very long time, it was really great for me and my family to reset. It gave me the mental refresh, clarity, and health I needed. I will interject here that I am very, very aware of how privileged I am to have been able to do this. And most people cannot. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. So it's not a thing I'm recommending. I'm recommending you don't let yourself get to that point, because if you do, sometimes you can't recover. We don't always get do-overs. So how do we not do all the things? It's kind of who we are. First and foremost, learn to say no. I know it's hard. We are impulsive and immediately want to say yes to everything. And when that doesn't happen, we want to say yes because many of us are people pleasers. I'm going to say here the same thing I tell my kids. It takes practice to get really good at things. So it may not feel comfortable when you first start, but lots in practice, it gets easier and easier. What I started doing to help me with this years ago was to start using the response when anybody said, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? What are you doing Saturday? Because I always went, yes, 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 yes. I started using the response. I need to check my calendar. Can you shoot me an email so I don't forget? Because I forget things easily. If I didn't feel comfortable with asking somebody to shoot me an email, then I usually use my phone or something to quickly jot down the info and record it. And then I put on my calendar routine times that at night I know I would just check any of those items that were outstanding. But the essential part of this all is to, one, actually get to check your calendar. That's why it becomes successful when you tell somebody, oh, I got to check my calendar, instead of just the automatic yes. Because one, you get to check your calendar and see if you actually have this space, right? And then two, you're pushing a pause button to consider if you even really want to do the thing. We so often have an automatic response of yes, that we don't even stop to think, do I really want to do it? A lot of the time, the answer is no. And it's really just easy to get back to the person and say, you know what, I have something else on the calendar that day, or whatever makes you comfortable to be able to say you can't do it. And then along those same lines, know that you don't even always have to give somebody an explanation. Just, sorry, I can't, I wish I could. 2, allow yourself to be imperfect. This is really hard. Aggressively imperfect was a term I heard recently, and I liked it. There is no perfect, and it's keeping you from reaching your full potential. It's a distraction that is hard to control. Perfectionism is a constant problem I deal with, even in small things that doesn't make sense to others. Like knowing I'm stretched for time and I still go back and format my notes a certain way. If you don't think you can resist the urge to make it perfect, then what I've learned to do is try putting the item on the back burner, saying, okay, I see this. I really, really want to format those notes, but let me put it on this pad of paper and do that at the end, because I know that I am not good at estimating time, and I need to finish this other thing first. And then if I have time at the end, I'll do that, because what's really important, right? And then anytime, if you actually have time at the end, because you've done all the things the way you want to, and you're going back to do that perfectionism, make it better, and refining mode, go ahead and set a realistic schedule for it, right? So you're not just doing it. If I'm left unchecked, I will do it. Even with this presentation, I was doing it like right up to the end, because I didn't put a schedule on it. So put a realistic schedule for it and put it on a timer. Tell yourself, I shouldn't spend more than X minutes on correcting the spelling on my notes that no one will ever see. That's one of the things that I do. Because I do that, I correct my notes for things that other people don't see. Those red squiggles under my words really, really bother me. Incidentally, I didn't go back and fix that in this, thank goodness. And I've spent a stupid amount of time on non-consequential things like that. By limiting that, you are more likely to stay on track with the schedule. So one, say, okay, I see this, I recognize it, I'm going to put it on my thing to do at the end. And then 2, at the end, if you still want to do it, or you have time, you still need to limit your time for doing it. Say, nope, I get 10 minutes to do this. That's it. And then, put your little Pomodoro timer on that keeps you accountable. 3, put everything on your calendar, color code it. For me, I let work meetings stay the color they come in as. I put red on my personal tasks, green for training items, yellow if it's a deadline or super important. Because when you tell people, let me get back to you, I have to check my calendar, then you have something visual to look at that you can easily see. What you can see things you can move that are inconsequential and things you can't. And if you only have and you can see if you only have a few spots left, then it makes it easier to quickly get back to people like your manager and explain how that new thing doesn't fit, or how, if it has to fit, then you open up a discussion for what needs to come off for, logistically this to happen. There's so many hours in a day. Well, look, these hours are taken. What do we need to move? For years, I actually had on my calendar with a notification from my phone, change litter box, because I needed the reminder. And I needed to schedule the time for it, or I'd push it to right before I go to bed. And then by the time I go to bed, I'd forget. We had automated litter boxes, so it didn't have to be changed like consistently every day. So that inconsistency made it difficult for me to remember. So what did I do? Put it on a calendar. 4, make self-care a priority. For years, I felt like certain self-care tasks, sleeping, getting a good amount of sleep being a big one for me, were unnecessary. Like I just couldn't give myself that luxury. I had to sleep train myself to make sure it became more of a habit. That didn't happen until, I was much, much older. And even now, if I fall out of that habit, then onto my phone calendar, get ready for bed goes until that habit gets reset again. Schedule time to be down so you don't burn out, and don't allow yourself to constantly move it. ADHD people do have a tendency to hit the snooze or move things around. And if that seems impossible, just put one self-care thing on your schedule first and do whatever that one thing is for you till it becomes a habit and is drilled into your brain. And then you can add maybe a second one and third. But self-care is super important. And you need to also put that on your schedule because it makes you better. For me, when the weather warms up in Iowa, it's super cold here in the winter, mine is to go for a walk. We have the most beautiful walking path in our neighborhood. And besides the exercise portion of it, the peacefulness I get where I can have free flow ideas, bop around podcasts, or listen to a book is a great way for self-care. And by the way, by doing that, when you make it a regular thing, whatever it is, once it becomes routine, you're getting that like pleasure hit in your brain that craves, right? So your mind actually will want that stimulation that it knows it happens at a certain time, and that becomes more easily to abide by. 5, give yourself permission to change your mind. So a lot of times we'll say yes, or we'll have all these things, and then we're at the, they come up on us and we're like, oh, I can't, this, I can't be in 2 places at once or 3 places. What do I do? When you see that, it's okay to go to somebody and say, you know what, I can't do it. You don't have to say, oh, I changed my mind. I didn't really want to do it if it's a singular thing. Because a lot of that times we will commit to things we don't really want to do. We just say that automatic yes. So whatever the reason is, just give yourself permission. It's okay to change your mind and go back to whatever the source is for putting something on your schedule to say, I can't. 6, automation. Automation, we talk about automation so much in our work lives and how that will make our processes better. And it's funny how we don't often realize them for our own personal life, the work life in other ways, right? There's many ways. If you take your IT mind and you step back and say, what is this process I do over and over in my life? And what can I do to automate it? Because really your end goal is, right, you're not doing all the things. So look at things in your life that you may be able to automate. And you could be talking about big things, right? But this is also for small things. I have a good friend of mine who, of course, whenever she comes home, she takes off her shoes and everything, but she also has this in her closet, this wall of dust bunny slippers that she wears on her feet. And she even gives them to guests when they come over, and they clean up dust bunnies as she walks. And so she gets home from work and she literally walks around dusting her floor without doing anything, just doing her regular stuff. So she has hacked that automation for a very, simple task that, you do in your day to day. One of the things that I learned from my ADHD, ADHD people have a tax on us because we forget things all the time, right? So, hey, automatic payments, they're great for me. I've got something on my calendar that says, hey, check that credit card bill that I look at each month. But I also incorporate in there, like, hey, on my credit card, pay this minimum amount each time, even if I forget to do it. So I've automated that in my life, right? Anything that you can pick up that automates things where it makes it easier to do, whether it's an app on your phone or whether it's dust bunnies on your foot or even bigger things. Incorporate that so you're actually doing less things. Delegation. We tend to get things in our head, ADHD people, and we want to do all those things, right, ourselves. It's got to be done a certain way. This was put to me, so it was wanting me to do it. And learning the fine art of delegation is important. You may be a senior person that your company doesn't want you spending time doing small tasks. That's not why they're paying you all that money. Those tasks were given to you, not necessarily for you to do, but for you to have done. So when you are able to say you're able to say, hey, to your boss, I tell my boss all the time, hey, we have some great people that we work with. I said, hey, can this person do this? Because I really need to focus on this high priority item. I do that a lot. And sometimes my boss will even take care of it instead. But that's what I mean by delegation. There's things within our own lines, personal lines, and there's things, within our work life that we can learn to delegate. I had hip issues from a sports injury a few years back, and I had to say, oh, you know what? It's time for my kids to learn how to unload the dishwasher, because it was hard for me to get in certain positions to do that. I delegated that task, right? So these are small examples, but the point of being delegation is good. Not only is it getting things off of your plate so you're not doing them, but you're also helping other people to learn those tasks as you delegate them to them. And then finally, number 8, break things into steps. Sometimes, and I've made a separate slide for this one, sometimes neurodiverse people don't estimate things well, not for time or all the steps that go into things. Breaking things down, even in simple form or a diagram that may only make sense to you, can illuminate feasibility of a project. This image was a concept diagram of steps I needed to take from one of my capstone projects. By breaking the project into steps, I could visually see things better to understand everything that was involved. Because my brain bops around too fast, I can't always catch the details, and this forces me to just slow down a bit. Another recent example I have is that we had a weekend server upgrade a few months ago. In my mind, it's easy peasy. And I felt there are a couple of other things I could do at the same time. Hey, while we have the server down, maybe we should consider doing these other things. But once I broke down the steps we would need for this specific server upgrade, even at a high level, it became really, really clear that I could not add on any additional items. I had considered I wouldn't have gotten enough sleep, and you don't really want to be working on production boxes like that. The bonus part of doing things like this, breaking things down into parts and steps, is that also it provides us with a beginning point check list that helps ADHD people stay on track when doing a project. Checklists are my holy grail. And really building a checklist goes back to automating. If I have a checklist I've previously built, then I can use it over and over and potentially adapt it to other things. So we talked about like how not to do all the things, but there are times that we have to do the things, right? And so how do we do that the most efficiently? Prioritize is one of those things that once you start doing it regularly, you can realize the nonsense that can fall off. I put this at the top because prioritize to me actually falls between how to do more things when you have to, and then also how not to do all the things. There's a reason you've been pushing that one task. Am I short on time? Am I running out of time?
No, you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. For the last 67 weeks, it doesn't need to be done. Do I need to close this? Do this. I created a value effort matrix. I first break items that have multiple steps into smaller pieces. We are crap at time estimating, so you're going to need to visually see all the items. Something may involve, because that can make you change how you view the effort. At least all of the ones you can put on paper. In this example, I figured out that these steps here weren't essential. I only had a certain amount of time. So by putting on the items, that was for that, like this, and I do this often when I have very complex things that I have to prioritize, it allows me to say, hey, you only have so many things you can do. What is the priority? That doesn't mean that things that fall in here, maybe absolutely not. It just means you can visualize them and choose them based on the amount of time and effort you have available. This is another way that I do this. I'm not going to go, we're getting a little bit short on time, so I'm not going to go into this too much. The next items we want you to look at in this category is your handy dandy toolbox. For me, I use Otter and OneNote and calendar alarms and the Pomodoro timer. You're going to need to find out what works best for you. You need to determine your most productive times of day for your productivity and plan accordingly. Don't eat the frog or do the 2-minute tasks now. Now, maybe when you're in hyper-focus mode and can pop out that code or research that awesome thing that will revolutionize your company. So find your patterns and plan accordingly. Keep a notepad near. Then you can, ADHD people have things popping into their head all the time that they want to go look at and go research and talk about. For me, I've learned to have that notepad and say, okay, I recognize the thing and I'm putting it down on paper and I can do it later. And that has saved me a tremendous amount of time for not getting distracted. Determine how mundane tasks can be refreshed. We need that stimulant effect, right? And so we don't like to do the boring things. Find out how you can make those things not so awful, right? For me, like if I'm doing laundry or I'm cleaning things I absolutely hate to do, I'm listening to a book or I'm listening to a podcast. Like, I love the TV crime thing or the crime things that I don't even want my kids to hear, right? So then I get to hear the thing while I'm doing all these tasks that I don't like to do. So making look at things of like, well, how can I change what is being sent to me sensorily, so I don't mind doing this tasks. Make sure you have downtime. Super, super, super duper important. If you don't have that downtime, again, you're going to get burnt out. So make sure that you have that on there to be able to perform efficiently. And again, I know I've already said this, don't forget your calendar, but it's just so important. So to close with, and to be randomly ADHD, I want to talk about what if. There is an excellent TED Talk from Caltech with David Anderson that is about feeding mutant fruit flies cocaine. Hopefully I've gotten your attention back. Actually, the title is Drugs, Dopamine, and Drosophila, a fly model for ADHD. So in this study, Dr. Anderson and his team did use mutant dopamine receptor fruit flies and ultimately learned they had two behaviors, hyperactivity and learning issues. So after feeding them cocaine to see the appropriate stimulant response, they went a step further and genetically restored the dopamine receptor by putting a good copy of it back into the fly's brain, but only in certain neurons and not in others, and then tested them for hyperactivity and ability to learn. What they found was, depending on where they put, here you see learning, the mushroom bodies in the central complex, depending on what they found was depending on where they put the dopamine receptor, it controlled if hyperactivity was fixed or if the learning disorder was fixed. But neither area fixed both. And it really had me thinking about all kinds of things. And one of the things that I thought about, giant leap here, what if? What if someone developed a process to take my ADHD away? Would I want it? And I thought, no, I wouldn't, because as much of a pain that it is and how hard it can make things, and also makes me, it also makes me really great at a lot of other things. And it pushes me to constantly learn new things and makes me have a million ideas and connect the dots that would be difficult, if not impossible, without ADHD. So I thought, no, absolutely not. And then I realized I couldn't find my ear pods for like the millionth time and was like, well, maybe that was short-lived, because learning how not to do all the things also means I want to do all the things. And my brain often ignores any perceived limitations. And that has made for an incredible life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy. We appreciate your time and we learned a lot from what you said.
Thank you.
Deepti, you're around? Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Well, you can stop sharing.